everybody. Thank you for coming along. It's so lovely to meet you all. Where are you from, first of all? Tell me. Hackney. So you're all from the same school? Yes, and you're in years 10 and 12, is that right? Yes. When I was your age, and I was at school, really certainly when I was in year 10, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I liked physics, I knew I liked science, and I think half the reason I liked it is because I was good at it, because I found it easy. I am not someone who necessarily goes after things that don't come easily to me, certainly not when I was young. But I had always been fascinated by space. That was my passion, that was my interest. And I thought, that's great, had no idea what to do with it. And as I went through school, and really it all started in about year 10, when my physics teacher held up a yellow piece of paper and said to me, there's this thing called space school, anyone want to go along? And I said, oh yeah, sure, I like space, that looks fun. I went along to this residential course and I discovered that there is a huge space industry here in the UK and you can get jobs in it. And suddenly this passion, this interest of mine started being something that I realized you could work in. And that was really where it all started from. And then when I was in year 12, we had to organise work shadowing. And I was sitting in the common room talking to friends. And people were saying, I want to perhaps go and be a teacher, or I want to be a vet. Some people wanted to work in theatre, all sorts of different people. And I said out loud, well, I want to work for NASA one day. Now, I said that because I had always been fascinated by space, as I said, but particularly what had got me was human spaceflight, all the astronauts. And I knew that NASA were the really cool people and they were the ones who employed astronauts. And I was never going to go and work in Russia, so NASA was the natural place for me to go. And so I emailed NASA. And I said, can I come and do some work shadowing? This was in 1997, so this was when email was really quite a sort of young thing. And I didn't really expect them to say anything. They actually wrote back and said yes. I was like, oh, okay. I then had to go home and explain to my parents. I'd emailed NASA and said, can I come and do some work shadowing? They had no idea about this, and they said, okay. And bless them, they were very good. They managed to scrape together some money, and I got on a plane and I went and I spent 2 weeks at NASA. And that was really one of the moments that changed my life, because I walked into mission control for the very first time. And I saw mission control, and then mission control, every satellite mission has it, but this was the space shuttle mission control, and it was amazing. You had all these people sort of talking on the voice loops, and they were practicing launch and aborts for the shuttle. And I thought, this is what I want to do. This is it. It was amazing. It was this brilliant. But I came home from that. I thought, well, that's never going to happen. In my mind, it was truly and genuinely impossible. I was a British schoolgirl. NASA still don't, as a true NASA employee, employ anyone other than American citizens. And the UK at the time, this was 97, 98, we didn't support human spaceflight. Helen Sharman had flown into space. She's our first British astronaut in 1991. And the government hadn't supported that, and really she'd gone, and the government were very clearly saying, we do not do human spaceflight. We're just, no money in it, not what the Britain does. So I really thought it's just an impossible dream. I should also add at this point, my school reports told me that I was terrible at English, I was terrible at languages, I was certainly always the last to be picked in school, so that area of my life also seemed pretty impossible. So I went off to university and I studied physics. I liked physics, but I didn't know what I was going to do with it, really had no clue. And actually, through my physics degree, discovered I hated physics. And I had loved it at school, but university for me, the physics course, it wasn't right. I was never going to be a scientist, I worked out. So I had the courage to say, right, I've finished my 3 years, but I didn't do the 4-year course. And I looked around, and one day I saw a brochure. This was really, internet was not what it was today. And there was a photograph of an astronaut on the front cover. So I picked it up. And I discovered that there was a master's course in space engineering. And so I applied for that, and I got a master's course, and I went off and I did space engineering. And slowly I started to realize that this was when I was realizing this passion of mine, this job of mine, this passion of mine actually could turn into a job, and I could go and do something I really enjoyed. When I finished my master's degree, I was offered a job at what is now Airbus, the people who manufacture satellites. And you would have think I would have jumped at that job. This was a job in the space industry, it's what I wanted. But it was looking at radar. And I looked at this job and I thought, it doesn't excite me, it's boring. And I turned it down. I didn't know what was going to come next, but I had the courage and I turned it down. And then a little while later, actually, Airbus were looking for applying to their graduate scheme, and just put on my CV, I want to work in operations. I like mission control. I had no clue that anything would come of this, and it turns out they were looking for graduate engineers to put a mission control centre together. So I got that job. I did that for 3 years. I then through that discovered that the European Space Agency were going to have a part of the International Space Station, and that they would need to have people and there would be a mission control centre. So I started looking for jobs and I applied for jobs and I got one, and I became someone, and I worked in mission control and I became a flight director, and that dream of mine when I was 17 was then came true. That then has led me to come back to the UK. I've managed Tim Peake's education program, and now I look after human spaceflight. And in 1997, when I was your age, that was impossible, not just for me, but for anybody to do. And the other things that I said were impossible then, I was terrible at languages. I was last to be picked in any team, and I was useless at English. I have now written a book, I have run the London Marathon twice, and I've lived in Germany. So my message to all of you really is that whatever seems impossible right now really may not be. Just find whatever it is that you like in life. If that's science, great. If you're sitting here and going, there's physics, but really I secretly love playing football, don't be afraid to go after that. Whatever it is, go for it. Space certainly is something that we welcome people from every different which way. There's so many different jobs there that you should go for it. But it's not about that, it's about you, and you've got to find the thing that you want to do. And don't lose sight of your dreams. I swear, my plan when I was 17 was find some American, marry them, and get a passport and move to Houston. That was as far as my career planning went for achieving that dream. But every little step along the way, I never lost sight of it, and now I'm sitting here talking to you. And that's really all I wanted to tell you, was go for it, because whatever it is you enjoy doing, you can go and do it. So we've got loads of time. I want to chat to you, I want to find out about you. So do ask me lots and lots of questions, and I want to meet you all. So yeah, talk to me. What can I tell you?
What A-levels did you take?
What A-levels did I take? I took physics and maths and further maths, because I was good at physics and maths, and I thought, and I was terrible at all these other things. I was then going to take chemistry, actually, but tried to decide chemistry, music, and I ended up taking music. And I've never used music ever since, but it's always been something I've enjoyed. I've not been so good at it. I was very glad, actually, as I walked out of my chemistry GCSE, I can't do this. The titrations, all the things that the practical side of chemistry is just not me at all. So yeah, that's what I did. Which university did I go to? I ended up at Imperial College and studied physics. But I didn't apply there, actually. When I was filling out my UCAS form, I looked around, and I swear you guys have it so much easier now because of the internet and student reviews and YouTube and websites. When I was applying, I had a pile of prospectuses, and you sort of had to flick through, and I don't even really remember how I chose. You read the courses and you kind of tried to think, oh, maybe that's fun. And what happened actually was I hadn't applied to Imperial, and I'd applied to Oxford and gone for the interview, and I hadn't done the right maths at the time, so they looked at me and said, no, you can't come here because you haven't learnt the maths by now that we need you to do, which has always wound me up. But it wasn't to be. And actually I was going to go to Southampton or Birmingham. And I kind of wish I had, in hindsight, because I think they'd have been much more fun universities. Imperial College is a superb academic place, but it didn't work so well for me socially. But someone said, it was my best friend, he said, all these places you're applying for, they only want you to get B's and C's in physics or something. Oh, you're better than that, you should go to somewhere that has this highbrow reputation. And I listened to her, and I just, again, emailed Imperial College and said, hey, might have made a mistake, can I come along? And they wrote back, and they wound up offering me a place, and I got it through clearing. So the point in all of that is it was just never, if you ask, you never know what's going to happen, and you make these decisions. But actually, the thing I didn't realise then is that a lot of the universities were offering me B's and C's because physics was not a very popular course for women. And they wanted me. They looked at me and thought it would be good, so they were trying to make it easy for me. And I misunderstood a sort of easy offer as somehow a less good institution. And Southampton and Birmingham, indeed loads of other places, are superb places to go and study physics or space science and these kinds of things. So yeah, I was swayed by the wrong things probably at that point in my life. Yes.
Was there a point when you wanted to be an actual, like an astronaut in space?
No. No. So many people ask me that. Did I ever want to be an astronaut? I loved that world. I was working in mission control at the European Space Agency when I was, it was in 2007, so I was in my mid-20s. And it was when the European Space Agency put out their call for astronauts that ultimately resulted in Tim Peake being selected. And loads of my friends were applying. And they said, do you not want to apply? I said, I really don't. I really don't want to sit on top of a rocket that's got about a 1 in 100 chance of exploding and live in a cramped tin can and all these things. My dream and my passion was mission control, and that's what I wanted to do. Still now, if you gave me a ticket and said, would you like to go, I'd love to do it. I'd love to experience what it's like, but I'd go. But no, it was never for me about being an astronaut. It was the problem solving, the mission control things that I found fascinating.
Was there like a point where you thought like you couldn't do it, and how did you like get back up?
Was there ever a point I didn't do it? Many, really. And so one of the ones that immediately has just sprung to mind is halfway through my physics degree. I mean, I really did not enjoy it, which was such a shock because I had loved it at school. And I just was looking at it going, this is not fun. I'm not enjoying it. And I've always believed that you should enjoy things. And if it's not fun, there's got to be a reason. And I had some horrible, horrible times, but I really realised I just had to get on with it. I had to get to the end because I was sort of 18 months, 2 years in now. So I took the decision, right, don't do the 4-year course, do the 3-year course and crack on with it. And that's usually the way I sort of deal with things is, okay, if something's not right, if things haven't worked out, just get on, go solve the problem, see what's what. I remember when I was applying for jobs, I was looking out to Germany. There was a job that I desperately wanted. It was crew support. I was working at the astronaut centre, and I'd applied and I got an interview. And I really liked the job. I was gutted when I didn't get the job. But you just keep going, really. I like the saying that that's from the best exotic marigold hotel, and it's come from somewhere. But if it will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not yet the end. So you just keep going, and you just have to have that self-belief that you're making things that make sense for you. And if you're true to yourself, it will always work out in the end, somehow. Just keep going. You're looking at me, yeah.
Is it a particularly male-dominated environment, and how's that been in terms of
Spaces, physics is, yes. I frequently throughout my university days career would find myself sitting in a meeting and suddenly looking around going, oh yeah, I'm the only woman here, again. But it's never bothered me, and also now, very, very rarely do I ever get sort of judged because I'm a woman or I'm a young, or at the time I was a young woman, I'm less young now. But there have been instances where I have felt that vibe, but less, I can count on one hand in my entire career. Maybe that's because I just don't pick up on them, but I really do think that today, people are much, much more welcoming. It is certainly a male-dominated industry, but that's not the same as it not being welcoming to everybody from all the different backgrounds. And I think one of the big challenges we face today, and you face, is that society still loves putting labels on us. And actually that has nothing to do with what you as a person want to achieve or can achieve or should achieve. It's all about what you want to do. And when we're really little, as soon as you're born, young children don't see labels or anything. They just grow up and they play with whoever comes along, and they'll play with a truck or they'll play with a dolly or what have you. It's the adults and sometimes the parents or TV around them that will start saying, oh, well, you're a little girl, here's a dolly, and I'm going to steal that. You can't have that doll. Or if it's a boy playing with a doll and a pram, some fathers might go, oh, no, you can't do that. And that's where we start learning these things from. And I actually find these things about women, sometimes I go, I don't think these labels are helpful, because it makes us start seeing barriers that might not be there. And in fact, any label that society has put on us, be it gender or race or disability or background or class, where you were born, what you want to do, no, it's got nothing to do with you and what you want to do. It's really important that society and companies present things that make you feel inclusive. I know, you can look at a picture, and it happened to me a little while ago with a satellite launch, and if you don't see yourself represented there, it can have quite a shocking image to you, or you start thinking, maybe I don't belong there. So you have to have the courage to get through that and get beyond it. But really, as an engineering science industry, it is so much better. I'm not saying it's perfect. The other nice thing is where I work at the minute at the space agency, you'd think it would be really male dominated, and we are 50% right through the different grades and the different areas. It's really, for some reason, just worked out that way. So it's a lovely environment to work in. But yeah, don't let anyone start telling you that you can't do something or you shouldn't do something because of what you look like or who you are or what you wear or anything like that. But you have to have the courage and self-belief to crack on with that. Yes.
How did you know you wanted to write a book?
How did I know I wanted to write a book? I didn't. It was something that happened. I have always been passionate about the ability of space to inspire people. And the longer I have worked through the industry, the more I've seen and the more it is. And it is important to celebrate these women, because we can all name Neil Armstrong. Half the people think Tim Peake was the first British astronaut now. Poor Helen Sharman has been lost. So it's important to celebrate these people. And it was something that came along and someone said, would you do this? And I thought, okay. I mean, my first reaction was, I can't write a book. But then you learn, if someone is suggesting to you that you do it, they're not setting you up to fail. People don't do that in life. If someone is approaching you and saying, would you like to do this? Unless they are really, really, really mean, and those people don't usually get to have, wield money or offers of projects, they think you can do it. So I just sort of thought, okay, if they think I can do it, well, let's trust that. And it turns out I wrote a book, and it seems to, people are enjoying it, and it's spreading a really important message. So that was another thing I learned somewhere along the line is take compliments and take things. When I was your age, really, if someone said to me, you're looking really nice today, I'd go, no, I'm not. Don't be silly. I would think they were making fun of me, possibly because at school people don't always have the right attitudes, but as you get older in life, they really don't. People are just being nice. People are much nicer than you realise. Yes?
What's the best thing about mission control?
What's the best thing about mission control? It's what I always wanted to do. It's if you've seen Apollo 13, any of you seen the film? No. Well, a few at the back, but go home and watch it. It's your homework for tonight. It's a brilliant film. Tells the really true story, and it's really well done. And that gives you a great feeling for what it's like to be in mission control. Not many people realise you can go and fly satellites or what have you, and what it's all about is all about, in this case, keeping the crew safe and problem solving. And I love problem solving. It's what I realise I have always enjoyed doing. It's what I'm good at. Every day is different. You're sitting there, you're looking at these amazing pictures and dealing with this amazing science that's being done. And an experiment will go wrong, and we will have to sort out the problem and move on with it. So it's just, for me, it was just the best thing ever. It's where my heart is. I've left it behind for good reasons, but yeah, I always like mission control. Tell me about what you're all doing. What sort of things do you like doing?
Well, we were all in the A-level physics.
Yeah?
And A-level maths.
A-level maths. And what other subjects are you taking?
Yeah, further maths and
Yes.
chemistry.
Technology and stuff, yeah.
Design.
No? And where do you, what sort of, are you looking at universities at the minute and thinking about where to get to? Yeah.
I'd like to go to Cambridge.
Yeah, very good. I like this ambition. This is great. Go for it. And then at the back, you're all year 12, are you? No, sorry, year 10. Yeah. Think about it. So what sort of GCSEs are you doing? What do you have to do these days?
Maths, English, science, and online.
Okay. And then you get a free choice and all the other ones. So some of you doing geography and history and things?
History,
Yeah? Anyone learning a language? Yes. Good for her. I hated languages at school, and I was made to do French GCSE, but and now I'm really, really grateful for it. There's something about travelling, and I lived in Germany and had to learn German, and there's something about being able to just say a few words. So I think, you know, no one understands languages so much there. Any more questions? Yes.
What about space is particularly fascinating?
What about space is fascinating? I think it's beautiful. For me, that it's human spaceflight, I think, interests all of us because we're all human. And so you sort of start seeing these people in this place that's like nothing on Earth. But even for me, you know, looking at the stars, what's out there, and then you start looking at the planets or the pictures of the planets, and it's so different. And I think that's certainly what captivates me. And certainly for the human spaceflight, since technology has evolved and we've had better communication links, so we can, you know, the astronauts can tweet from the space station now, and there's videos coming down and there's photographs coming down all the time. It's just made it so much more connectable and appealing, and makes us all really more exciting.
When you were in the
Mission control?
mission
Yeah.
control, was there ever like a point when it was like really stressful, like one moment where
Oh yes.
you were
Many. The one I often talk about, because it was for me the thing I remember, was when I nearly killed the crew. So what happened, I was what was called increment lead flight director. So we have, the space station has been there since 1998 and continuously crewed since 2000, and it blows my mind that for your lives there has always been people in space, which I find crazy. Though even for me, and I was born in 1981, actually there's been pretty much people in space my whole life, which I kind of forget, and so it shows you how far we've come. But so we have to run things in what we call increments. We split everything up, and you have somebody who's in charge for 6 months of keeping an eye on everything. And it was my turn to do that. And it was Christmas. And I swear the space station knows when it's Christmas, and it just saves up all the problems and it throws them out at you. So literally, I was really looking forward to coming back to the UK and getting home for a few days. And we had a problem with what's called an ammonia pump. So the space station has 8 big solar arrays, and it generates all the electricity, and we have to get rid of all the heat, all the excess heat. So we've got a big cooling loop, and it's cooled by ammonia. Ammonia, as you may well know from your chemistry, is lethal. I mean, in pure ammonia, a few drops, few parts per million will kill you. And we use this in its pure form on the outside of the space station to cool it. And this loop shut down. There was a problem. And that meant that we had to do some power downs. And really, I thought the end of my problem was the end of my day. The worst of it was that the Columbus module, we had not enough power. We had to turn off some experiments. We had to interrupt some science, and that was a pain. But we had practiced for this, and we reconfigured it, and we got to the end of the day, and we said, that's fine. And that should have been the end of it. But what happened was that the engineers suggested, we had a sort of engineering recommendation that we had to bypass what was called bypass this thing called the interface heat exchanger. So you had a cooling loop inside the Columbus module that had water, and on the outside you had ammonia. And because the ammonia wasn't flowing because this pump had shut down, the engineer said, you want to stop the water flowing on the inside. So we did that, and I still remember the time when it was a guy called Simon. He came up to me and said, this is what we need to do. I said, the engineers say this is what you need to do. He said, yes. I said, yep. He said, can I do it? And I said, yes. And it was my decision for this to happen, and that was where it all started going wrong. Because what we didn't know, and the engineers hadn't known, and what have you, was we thought when we shut this down that the water and the ammonia would sit there, and because they were connected to the rest of the space station, we thought they would stay at an ambient temperature. But what happened was that it got colder and colder and colder. So you had water on one side of this box and ammonia on the other. And this interface heat exchanger, you had water, as I say, flowing through one side and ammonia on the other. And it has lots of interleaving layers to transfer the heat. And so the water was sitting there and it was getting colder. And because this box was on the interface of 3 different people who were all supposed to be monitoring it, nobody was keeping an eye on the temperature. And normally in mission control, every parameter that we have, whether it's a power or a pointing angle, or whether a switch is on or off, it has what we call limits on. So if it's in the wrong place, it alerts mission control that something wrong. But this box had a temperature reading and we weren't monitoring it. And overnight, later in the week, it was through the night, NASA called up the ESA Control Center and said, hey, we've seen that box is getting really cold. We've spotted it in an overnight run. And so they turned the heaters on because there was a heater near it, so we warmed it up. It had got down to 4 degrees. And I got the phone call in the morning. I thought, oh, great, but you turn the heater on. Okay, fine, we're done. We should have caught that. But again, I forgot all about it. And then I went home for the weekend, and on Monday morning I was in my office and my boss came in and her face was white as a sheet. And I thought, oh, what's wrong? And she said, yeah, the engineers have been running the numbers over the weekend and that box, we're worried it might have frozen. And at that point my heart sunk and I knew what that meant and what might have happened and the consequences. So this box has got water on one side and ammonia on the other, and it got colder and colder and colder. We know we got it at 4 degrees. If it got down to 0, the water was going to freeze. And you will know, I'm sure you know, that when water freezes, it expands. So you had this water trapped in this box, and if this water had expanded and then weakened or breached the interface with the ammonia, and breached that, the ammonia was going to come rushing in. And we know, because we train for this as a possible problem on the space station, if the ammonia comes rushing in because there's a breach somewhere, it gets into the water cooling system, it starts turning into a gas, it bubbles out through the air vents into the atmosphere, and it can kill the crew. And it is that quick and instant, and it's irreversible, and once you've done it, there is nothing that can be done on any of the US side of the space station. And so in my mind I was suddenly going through all of this, going, oh, no, this is what could have happened. We could kill the crew. Or could have killed the crew, especially I went back to that decision where I said, okay, isolate it and then turn the heaters on, and just bad things could have happened. So at this point, the ammonia wasn't flowing and the water wasn't flowing. So we were okay because we hadn't had a leak, but what we were starting to realize was if we just weakened this box, when we started pumping high pressure ammonia back through it, it might, break through some weak spot and still could just right off the space station. That would be the best case scenario. The worst case scenario would be that we would get ammonia into the atmosphere and it could prove lethal. I should say, it's quite a fun fact at the minute, if that we train for this, and if it happens, and the crew are trained to, if they smell ammonia, and it's very distinctive, you smell it even once, it's so powerful it knocks out your nose, so you only have to smell it once, but as soon as you do, you hit the alarm to alert your crewmates, and you get as fast as you can out of the American half of the space station into the Russian segment, because the Russians don't use ammonia to cool it. And you shut the door when everyone's there to try and keep the ammonia there. And you take all your clothes off and you leave them sort of behind the door, and literally all your clothes, because if there's any ammonia got on your clothes, you just don't want it sticking to your skin. So you leave your clothes before you shut the hatch, and then you put on a breathing mask and you start breathing. So it also, in my mind, I always remember that if this happens, and it's a very serious thing, you end up with 6 naked crew members behind there all breathing because they don't want the ammonia on them. So I knew all of this, and it was going through, but we hadn't done it. So I was getting worried that maybe when we started flowing the ammonia again, it would happen. So I then had a really quite busy lead up to Christmas. This was all the week before Christmas. I'd gone home by this point. I was having teleconference after teleconference at my mum's house, and we had the engineers on, and we were looking at it and going, how cold did it get? What's the design of this box? Did it get weak? What are the risks? And in the end, we walked through all of this, and we looked at all the different possibilities, and we concluded that it would be okay, and that this box probably hadn't frozen, and that it was okay to use it again. And it was on Christmas Eve that the astronauts did a spacewalk to replace the thing that had failed originally, that had started this whole chain of events. And it was on Christmas Day that year that we switched everything back on, and we flowed ammonia through, and it was all fine. And obviously it's fine, the space station's still there. And best Christmas present, breathed a huge sigh of relief. But you asked me, was it stressful? And going through all of that, stressful and emotional, when you're going through it all, you just deal with it. We are trained in simulation after simulation after simulation to to know how to handle problems. So you just get on with the job. And it wasn't until really after that, when I sort of finally relaxed, almost started eating my Christmas dinner, that I realised the tension and the emotion of it all. And when you look back, then you realise what a tense environment it was, and you know, how critical it was. And we're all trained with it, and it's fine, and we learn a lot of lessons from that. But that is by far one of my most memorable events, when it all went horribly wrong. So real things happen in mission control. It's a hugely exciting place. And the big secret, anyone working in mission control, they secretly long for the day when it all goes horribly wrong, really, because that's what we're there. We're trained, we like problem solving. We don't wish the crew to have life and death situations every day. That's too far. But when things go wrong, that's when your brain starts going, and it starts getting really interesting. So I always like it when stuff goes wrong from that point of view. There you go. Yeah.
What was your favourite time?
What's been my favourite time? My favourite time from mission control, I think, was the day I first walked into mission control and thought, this dream of mine is real. This could happen. And when I was, what I had really wanted to be was a flight director. And when I was 17, I'd sat in the flight director chair in Houston and had a photo taken. And about 10 years later, when I was training to be a flight director, I sat in that same chair and I had that same photo taken. And that, yes, my 17-year-old self had made this come true. Was amazing. But far more memorable really has been the work I've done with the Tim Peake mission and at the Space Agency. And I will never forget the day he went into space. I was in the Science Museum. We had 3,000 school children cheering Tim on his way. And it was spine-tingling when he lifted off, and the noise there, that was amazing. But really what caught me was later that day, I was standing next to Helen Sharman, and we were both on camera explaining what was happening to Tim at the time. And I sort of caught myself realising, first British astronaut there, second British astronaut up in space, and I'm here in the middle of it, and people are listening to what I've got to say, and this is my job, and this is my dream, this is what I wanted to do. And it just sort of caught me. And really, I say, when I was your age, I had these dreams, but not once for a minute did I think it was possible. You just keep going. That's really, you know, whatever it is, don't be afraid to tell people, because, you know, if you put it out there, people listen, and that's how things happen. How are we doing for time, by the way? I've got no idea what the time is. Okay, 5 minutes. So a few more last questions, burning questions.
What is your book about?
What is my book about? It's very good. Well, there you go. It's right here. It's called A Galaxy of Her Own. It tells 50 stories of women who have contributed to human spaceflight. And it goes right back to the 1700s with Emily de Châtelet, when women in Paris, I mean, they weren't allowed in libraries. They weren't allowed to do anything just because they were female. And it's just picked out different people from all sorts of different backgrounds, not just astronauts, but the women who helped with the astronaut food, and the women who sewed the spacesuits that they wore on the moon, to the woman who managed the team that wrote the software to do the Apollo command module. And that's all America. And then you've got people in Europe like Helen Sharman, Gerda Horndig, who's an amazing scientist in Germany, who is looking at life and how it might have evolved in astrobiology and things. Loads of different women, right through the ages, really looking ahead to today. And the thing that links all of them is that wherever they were in history, they found what they enjoyed, they didn't lose sight of it, and they didn't listen to anyone who told them they couldn't. And that was true in the 1700s with Emily de Châtelet translating Newton's work into French. People said she couldn't, she had to have a child, she had to have a family, but she stuck to what she believed in. You've got astronauts, Peggy Whitson, who's on the front cover. I mean, really senior, important scientists told her that an astronaut was a terrible job to have and she should never be doing it, but she didn't listen to them and she got on with it. And she found a way. And that's what it's there. So it's really about celebrating the women, because it is such a male-dominated industry. And it's not to say that there aren't many, many important men too, and I wouldn't want people to think that this is a book just for women. You know, boys, men can read it. It's for everybody. It's just sort of trying to show that this area, human spaceflight, is somewhere that everybody can work. So I hope you enjoy reading it. And I must say that the illustrations in it have been done by the students from the London College of Communications, and they're fantastic. So they really do bring the women to life as well. It's quite gorgeous. So I hope you enjoy it. Anything else? might seem a good point to finish then there. But last questions? No? All right, well, thank you for your attention, and I hope I've told you a few exciting things, but yeah, just go home, keep going, and now you can do it. Yes, one more question.
Was there anyone who said like you couldn't do it?
Has anyone told me I couldn't do it?
Yeah.
I'm sure they have, but I don't remember because I obviously didn't listen to them.
Is there anyone who said like who like encouraged you still, like really encouraged you?
There are, yeah, of course there are. And I think for me, one of the great things was that my parents, when I was young, just let me get on with everything, and whatever I enjoyed doing, they supported me. I always remember my physics teacher, the one who held up the yellow piece of paper. I have to say, I went to an all-girls school. And for me, that ended up being important because I liked physics and I liked maths. And I was not a popular child at school. I had frizzy hair and people, made fun of me and I was not happy. And if I had have had to have dealt with, on top of that, boys saying you shouldn't be doing physics because you're a girl, I don't know what that would have done to me. I may have had the strength to get on with it, I may not, who knows. So for me, that worked out well. Then as I've gone on, I've just got on with it. And just had the courage that this is what I want to do, and possibly the stupidity in some ways, but it's worked out well. So it's never stupid to believe in what you believe in and to know that you can do it. And I say, whether that is space or science, or secretly you really want to go and take up sewing, or you love baking, or whatever it is, you work every day of your life. And if you aren't enjoying it, go and find something you do, because it's just not worth it. So there are times then you have to do your tax returns, and that's not fun, but you know why you're doing it. So just make sure you always understand why you're doing something. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the book. Thank you.